We have panelists from civil society organizations that will be sharing their work on resilience in different fields. So over to you, Barsha.
Thank you. And good afternoon and good morning, everybody, and welcome to the second session. As Maria has already said, we are kind of a little challenged as regards the time. So without much ado, and I think it's a very interesting movement right now from the first panel where we started speaking about informal settlements, the importance and significance of grassroots organizations, NGOs. So very smoothly, we can move on to the next panel. So happy and honored to be here. And we have three panelists, very eminent people from NGOs from across the country over here. And the subject is a role of NGOs in resilience capacity building. So very interesting again, and we look forward to a very interesting discussion. So may I welcome the three panelists and Siraz. Yeah, I can see him. So Siraz is here, and what I'll do is I'll do a brief introduction. I'll invite all the three panelists, but I'll do an introduction just before they start speaking so that it's much more easier to resonate. So Siraz, Lara and Roshni, I hope we have all the three of us over here. We do. Hi Lara, welcome. Roshni, do I see you here too? Yes, hi. Hi Roshni, welcome. So we have all the three panelists. Just some few housekeeping rules before we begin, and I introduce Siraz to share his excellent work with MHT. As Tanya has already mentioned, question answers, please put it into the Q&A box. To the panelists, 10 minutes to share about your experience around your work on building resilience in informal settlements. So welcome Siraz, and Siraz is the Senior Program Management Specialist at Gujarat. In Gujarat, he works with the Mahila Housing Seva Trust. He's been working on strategic planning, program management, policy development, change management, fundraising, partnerships, and of course, the most critical part of it, the talent management. So the entire process of it, I think Siraz is handling at MHT. He's been working on issues of disaster, humanitarian aid, habitat development, water and sanitation, health, livelihood, and governance. So Siraz, welcome to BRUCOM, and very excited to hear about your work with MHT. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for this kind introduction, and thanks for having me here. So I will share my screen so I can just control my presentation. Give me a minute.
Yeah.
Is my presentation visible?
Not yet. Yes, it is now.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, so I will take a minute to just talk about Mahila Housing Seva Trust, and after that I will talk about what at Mahila Housing Seva Trust we feel is a role of a non-profit organization, particularly in building capacity of vulnerable community. So Mahila Housing Seva Trust is an organization that's mainly work in urban area, particularly with urban slum dwellers. And our mission is to organize and empower women and organize them into a community action group, particularly women who are working in informal economy, to provide them technical service and to build their capacity so that they can take charge of their habitat own improvement. And the way that we see our role at MHT is that we see ourselves as a facilitator between the key three important stakeholders, that is local government, service provider, and when I talk about service provider, I do also talk about private players here, and the communities that we are working with. And broadly, MHT works on water sanitation, climate change and sustainable energy, affordable housing, livelihood, and democratic urban governance. Now, today I'm going to particularly talk about role of an NGO in capacity building related to the climate change. So at MHT, when we talk about climate change and when we have been implementing this project on the climate change, we have identified few barriers which are extremely critical when you are implementing a project on building and capacity. So four key barriers that we have identified. So first is about information barrier, and I'm starting my presentation with this barrier because it's important that we understand this barrier and how the capacity building is helping us to address this barrier. So first is about information barrier, and I think David also mentioned that unfortunately, people who are into the informal economy or are residing in slum areas, they are largely invisible as far as government policies and programs are concerned, and that's mainly because the data related to their settlements or habitats are not available to the local administration and the policymakers, that the plans can be prepared to address their vulnerability. So I think that's key, and we need to somehow address that issue. Second is also when you talk about climate change, though climate change may be the buzzword for most of us in the webinar, when you start talking with the community, for them, climate change is something which is difficult to understand. So I think the barrier that we need to address is how we can make climate change more understandable to the community, how we can make them realize that this is something that is impacting their life day in and day out, and how they can start adapting to the climate change at their own level. So that's about information barrier. Second is about institutional barrier, and the two key institutional barrier that I will like to highlight is here about the ability of a community themselves to understand the risk that they are exposed to carry out the risk assessment, and then based on that risk assessment to develop the plan to address that risk on their own. So it's more about the bottom-up planning. Second important aspect about institutional barrier is also about the boundary organization. So at the one hand, you have the government who is responsible for safety, security, and development of this vulnerable community. On the second side, you have the private players and the service provider who do have solutions to address this vulnerability, but somehow there is a lack in terms of a boundary organization who can bring all these players together and to make the solutions which are already available in the market to be accessible and affordable for the poor people. Third, and I think most important barrier is also about access to finance. And we all know that people living in this informal settlement, because of their informal livelihood and the land that they are living on, the most of the bank or the financial institutions are unable to extend them the credit. So that becomes a great barrier in terms of adaptation, because if they have to invest in improving their habitat or house, they definitely require access to finance. And that's something which is emerging as a challenging in most of the developing countries. And fourth barrier that we are talking about is a technological barrier. So at least in last 1 decade, we have seen that there are a lot of technological solutions which are emerging in terms of helping poor community or in generally a community to adapt to climate change. But somehow those solutions are designed in a way which are not addressing the needs of the poor community in particular. So how this technological solution can be designed that these solutions are more specific to the needs of the urban community. So these are the four, I think, barrier that we will have to keep in mind. Now, MHT strongly believes that the most effective way of addressing the capacity building issue is to provide them the requisite knowledge to undertake their own vulnerability assessment, and then to equip them with the available resilience solution. I think this is important. Once they understand their own vulnerability and the technical solutions are made available to them or accessible to them, this community will be able to design or develop and execute their own climate change adaptation plan. The only factor that we will have to focus on, that there is an institutional mechanism to represent their voices. So if there are any issues, policy issues, or the issues that can be raised with the local administration. So I think having their voice in the institutional mechanism is key, and that is something that NGO has to focus on, that these poor people have that voices when they are part of the process. Now, I think just to list out the role that NGO can play, I will talk about a project that MHT has implemented 2 years back. It was a project which was funded by USAID as a part of a Global Resilience Partnership Challenge. And MHT implemented this project across 100 slums in India, Bangladesh, and Nepal. And this project particularly focused on 4 climate stresses, that is heat stress, water scarcity, flooding and inundation, and water and vector-borne diseases. And when we talk about, and this project was mainly focused on building the capacity of vulnerable communities. So I think first aspect that NGO has to play is about making sure that the poor community understand what does climate change means in their day-to-day life. So how climate change is impacting. So for example, increasing heat stress, how increasing heat stress is going to impact their health, how increasing heat stress is going to impact their livelihood, and in turn their financial status or their family financial budget. So I think we will have to invest a lot in terms of creating the communication tools which can be easily which can help us to easily disseminate that information in the way and the language that the local community can understand. So I think that's the first role that non-profit organizations who are close to this vulnerable community can play in terms of designing innovative communication tool to help them understand the impact of climate change. Second is about training them or building their capacity to conduct their own vulnerability assessment and to help them to prepare their own resilience plan. And it has three main components. One is about helping them to realize the climate change. Second is about analyzing how it's going to impact their life or their habitat. And third is about visualizing and presenting that data to the key stakeholders or the decision maker who can then help them to execute their action plan. Third important role that NGO can play is about engaging this vulnerable community in execution of the plans that they have prepared. So generally it happens that plans are prepared by the government and executed by the government with or without with a very little engagement of the local community. So in this project MHT, to just give an example, we were working on issue of water quality and vector-borne diseases. So here we had a concept where we were training this local community to perform the water quality testing in their slums. So they were trained, they were doing the water quality testing in their slums, and if there are certain abnormalities found, they were sharing this data with the local government, and then local government in a way was convinced to take actions to address those issues. Same way when it talk about vector-borne diseases, we were training children as a child doctor. Doctor was just a motivation word where they will identify these larva breeding sites in their slums, and they will force the family or convince the family and the government to take action in terms of reviewing this larva breeding site. So the point that I'm trying to make is that it's not only about preparing a plan, but how to engage the community in execution of that plan. That is extremely important. Second is also about how technology can be made more accessible to this local community. So during this project, we also tried out many technological solutions in the slum area. So to give an example, one solution was about cool roof technology. So there was a private manufacturer in city of Ahmedabad, Gujarat, who was manufacturing this mode roof. And this mode roof, when they are replaced with the tin roof, it will decrease the inside temperature by 5 to 7 degrees Celsius, thus improving the thermal comfort of the households. So the way that we implemented the solution was that we carried out a pilot in slums where this mod roof were installed, and families were trained to take the temperature reading in their house for a duration of 365 days, which means all the 4 seasons, and compare it with the temperature that IMD is publishing on the website. So community themselves implemented that solution, and by taking that reading, they themselves realized that no, this product is actually reducing the temperature and improving the thermal comfort by 4 to 5 degrees Celsius, which means that they are convinced about this solution, and then they were more willing to invest as far as adaptation of this technology is concerned. Now, to address the issue in terms of if you want to scale up this solution, then definitely any solution which has a financial implication is going to be a challenge for poor people to implement. So MHT in cooperation with the credit cooperative societies specially design a loan product where a family can purchase this mod roof and make the payment in 36 installment. Due to this financial product, the technology adaptation becomes very easy at a grassroots level. So the point that I'm trying to make is that when, as a non-profit organization, when you are designing a solution and implementing a solution, you need to keep your eye and ear open to identify the barriers for scaling up that solution. Because real impact can only be made if you're scaling a solution at a certain level. And that's where I feel is the role of an NGO. I think I have run out of my time, so I will conclude my presentation here and hand over to you, Barsa. Sorry, I have to speed up because of my slides. Thank you.
Not at all. Thank you so much. And thank you for keeping the time. We just made it in 10 minutes. And thank you for this excellent presentation and sharing of MHT's work, and particularly the ideas around piloting and financing and the role of NGOs in building this resilience was very